God, an 85, Jerry, that's ridiculous.
Well, maybe the test was gender biased. You know, a lot of questions on hunting and testicles.
Oh, hello, Professor.
George, I cannot
Please.
believe... No, there's gotta be a mistake.
You should have seen her face. It was the exact same look my father gave me when I told him I wanted to be a ventriloquist.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what are we talking about today?
I'm smarter than you are. It's IQ tests, Jay.
IQ tests of one's intelligence. Yeah, this is a fun sitcom trope. I feel like this isn't one that happens on every show, but it's definitely...
But there was enough. Like, there was a bunch out there.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I think even the specific sort of subtrope of somebody dumb getting a high score
right,
on
somebody
some
that the
sort
cast
of
like
test.
assumes is the like dumb one of the group kind of outstrip. We have two like that.
Yeah, I feel like that sort of irony is definitely a well-worn, familiar, rite of passage in many sitcoms.
Right. I think sometimes it's more like, how did you get an A and I, failed or whatever. But this time is explicitly IQ tests.
Yeah.
One of them, I think... It's a little bit shaky as to whether or not it's actually an IQ test with the way they're describing it.
Well, here's what I am going to say, is that I think this is a fun trope, and we'll get into all the different angles that these different sitcoms take on it. I think this is one where the writer's familiarity with what they are writing about, with what the IQ test is and how
very
it works.
Varied.
Yeah, I think in at least two of these cases, they straight up confused it with the SAT.
Or just any standardized
test.
Yes,
and truly didn't understand what the actual IQ test is, how it is administered, etc. So before we get into our shows, I'll ask you, have you ever personally taken an IQ test or administered it? I assume as an educator, you're at least, have some solid understanding of what it is.
Right. So, in order to administer truthfully, you have to be a trained psychologist.
Yes.
And so I've given screeners as I was a teacher of the gifted. And so I gave the screeners. We would let the parents know whether or not we needed to send a kid for a full evaluation, which included an IQ test or some a battery of psychological testing of cognitive ability. And I also, like you, I was in the gifted program when I was a kid. So in order to get into that, you do have to take some sort of variant of an IQ test.
Yeah, I have a couple experiences with this. One of them is exactly like what you're saying. I never considered it an IQ test, but not to brag, I was part of the gifted and talented program in grade school, and I believe it was abolished basically as soon as we exited it. And it's something I've always had very sort of strongly mixed feelings about, because just like you, I took this test when I was in second, third grade. And it was the things that I remember specifically were blocks that had these sort of triangular, they were bifurcated red and white, and you had to match the patterns and things like that. There was a test you would give a little kid to measure their sort of reasoning ability. And as a result of that test, I was put in that program for the rest of elementary school once a week I was taken from my grade school with 5 or 6 kids from each grade school in the district. We were bused to this other place and just talk about the little kid version of the rich get richer. You know,
Right.
it's like we
Yeah.
were
No,
identified
it's
as the
exactly what
smart
it is.
kids. And so we got this cushy, like it was a blast, like once a week.
Yeah, you get to do project-based learning. You got to follow your own desires.
Not to mention the fact that we spent hours on the bus just going to and from this other school. And when we got there, they immediately gave us lunch. Like it was the equivalent of a white collar job where you make more money, being so much easier than an actual rough and tumble job. Now, granted, I guess we were responsible for doing all the schoolwork that we missed. And in that sense, we were, you know, like we were doing more work, quote unquote, because we certainly had projects and stuff for this other program, but it did not feel like this. It felt like 1 out of 5 days got to do this much more fun thing with my friends. And it was instrumental in my social development. I was so much more comfortable and sort of like outspoken and engaged in that gifted program than I was in a normal school. And so I really benefited from it immensely. At the same time, I recognize it's so messed up that they were using, you know, district money to send us to and fro. The kids that needed that education the least were given all these extra resources and allowed to do whatever the hell these hippy dippy teachers wanted us to do. And so, yeah, that's one example of the quote unquote intelligent test. But another was when I was in my early 20s, my friend Erica was doing her doctorate in psychology. And so as part of her thing, I let her administer on me the proper IQ test, the full battery of tests where you sit down for like 2 hours.
Right.
And it's all kinds of tests about memory and cognition and all kinds of things.
Right.
And it's not, you know, like I guess in the end there is some sort of numerical score, but they do a whole write-up and assessment and everything. And so
an IQ test is just part of that.
Right.
Right.
And so it just, you know, that experience made watching these sitcoms particularly laughable when the IQ test is presented as either something you have to do in school in order to determine what college you get into, or something that your girlfriend makes you take in like the spare room, you know.
Well, but
like,
that example of George's girlfriend in Seinfeld having him take it is just like your friend going through her course and saying, please take this.
I guess that's true.
That's
and
what
maybe
was
even
happening
they
with him.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But again, in real life, it has to be administered. It's not just like, here, take this test and, you know, get back to me.
Yeah, there are questions that they are asking of you. Like there's someone not necessarily reading you a question, but there are questions that require you to like converse with the person who's giving you the assessment.
Yeah, maybe my larger point is that this was something that I was given for a very specific reason. It wasn't just like, all right, everybody, time for your IQ test, you know, line up to the guidance counselor's office.
Sure. It's so interesting to see all of these shows kind of have that same mindset, like, oh, you just have to take these tests, and oh, you just have to do this, and it's going to place you and it's going to put you somewhere. But I definitely have worked in a school where they were trying to get their gifted and talented numbers up. And so they tested all first graders and all second graders. So that could be a situation like some of these schools where they just test everybody.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. What are our shows? What did we watch?
We watched Good Times Season 2, Episode 7, The IQ Test, Night Court Season 6, Episode 10, Mental Giant, Seinfeld Season 3, Episode 7, The Cafe, and Keenan and Kel Season 3, Episode 7, IQ Can Do Better.
Yeah, so this Good Times episode is going to go in a completely different direction than I thought. I assumed, and I guess, I don't know if I had read this or I just got in my head, that Flo was going to like have a high IQ and the whole thing was going to be about that. Like
about Florida?
Yeah. I did not know where this was going to go. But yeah, we've talked about Good Times once or twice before. You know, we've talked about how those Norman Lear shows in relation to Gary Marshall, like they're not quite they don't quite have the production value. They're a little more like sort of flimsy, but they've got that passion, like just the audience
and they deal
is
with
so
social
into it.
issues, and they feel more like home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you really feel that sense, like the electricity of the live performers and everything. We talked about how Good Times has a little bit of the Family Matters issue where it was meant to be this sort of down-to-earth, sitcom about this working class family, and there was this weird irony where it's like the most sort of like fair-minded portrayal of a black family on TV, except for this one crazy character that turns out to be the one everybody loves and kind of latches onto.
Right.
And so, you got JJ being all crazy, but in both episodes we've talked about, he's kind of off to the side. He does his funny thing.
Yeah, and we've been fortunate because we've watched early episodes, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole family, this is season 2, so the whole family is still there.
Yeah.
It's later when, it was his name, John Amos, ends up, he quits or kind of gets fired because he's clashing with the producers and the writers who want to make it more about JJ and all of the stuff. They later seasons, they legitimately blow up the family and they make him, he leaves and they say he's gone to prison.
Yeah, no,
you know
we
what
went
I mean?
through
Which
all
was
that.
like nothing that this family that we realize they're the one stable family, in the hood. And so like that's what this show is all about. So the fact that they went in that direction was just really upsetting.
Yeah, it's one of those shows that just totally kind of like loses its way after a while.
Yeah.
But in these early episodes, it's great. First of all,
it's living up to the promise of what it could be, right? Like JJ's the funny character, and like you said, he's kind of pushed off to the side. But in this one, they're tackling this issue. Michael is graduating. He's the youngest son. He's graduating from 8th grade. And this is one of the ones where they definitely have mistaken an IQ test for a standardized test, but that's okay because it still works in the context of the show. He has to take an IQ test at the end of 8th grade so they know what type of high school or what he should study when he goes to high school. So Michael is the genius of the family. JJ's painted a picture of him in Supreme Court robes as his graduation present. He wants to go to law school. Like he's going to be the kid that, does better than his parents.
Yeah, in both episodes we've talked about he's been the focus.
Right.
And he's the one. I'm sure this sister had some stories once in a while, but you get the impression she's kind of off to the side a lot of the times.
Yeah, it's just her and JJ fighting.
Yeah. And so, they're getting this graduation party ready for him. He comes home with a letter from teacher or guidance counselor saying, your son got one of the worst scores in the school. He should not consider an academic career, but rather a trade school. And, basically saying, your kid's a dummy.
Right. And of course, his parents are like, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
like, we know that's
here?
not true. What's going on?
Yeah. And so this is wild to me to hear this coming out of a sitcom in the 1970s when, like we were hinting at, this is still a very controversial notion today. He says verbatim, they don't know it, but it's nothing but a white racist test. He says it doesn't tell you how smart you are. It just tells you how white you are.
Yeah.
And I went into this thinking this was going to be another wait a minute, my wife has a higher IQ than me. Now I'm grumpy. I just expected this to be a standard sitcom
Or like
story.
JJ getting the high IQ or something.
I was really surprised when he starts talking about, there's all this racial bias. And then he starts explaining exactly the kinds of things that decades later we're still talking about.
Or still arguing about.
Yeah. He starts going, well, here's an example. They're trying to do word association things like cup and saucer, but my friend, Benny or whatever, he said cup and table because he doesn't know what the hell a saucer is. They do math problems that are like, if you have so many beds in your house and these are the bedrooms, then how many guest rooms or something? And JJ's like, the only guest room I've ever heard of is when someone puts a sleeping bag in the bathtub.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. And so, yeah, Michael's point is that the questions are not for people who are living in poverty, right?
Yeah.
They're written by and they're written for people who know what a guest bedroom is, or people who have, cups and saucers instead of cups and blank something else.
Yeah. And so then Michael starts talking about this black intelligence test that he says, I happen to have a copy of, and he's talking about it very specifically. And so I looked it up, and yeah, this is all true. Mm-hmm. This is something that was invented in the 70s by Robert something or other.
Yeah, the doctor that they name in the episode. He's a psychologist, and he recognized in his training that a lot of the questions were assuming an understanding of a majority culture that isn't a true universal culture.
Yeah. Now, this psychologist or whoever he was definitely had some panache. Are you aware of what this test is like sort of familiarly known as?
I am not. What's it called?
It's the Bitch 100.
Why?
The Black Intelligence Test of Cultural Homogeneity, and it's 100 questions. Bitch 100, baby.
That's really funny. I guess he'd get some response from that.
Yeah, but so the bitch test, as it is known, it seems
well, and on
weird
this
as hell.
episode, they called it the Black Intelligence Test.
Yes,
they did
don't
not
refer
call it
to
the
it
bitch test
as that. Yeah, Michael explains to his parents there is this test. It is favored toward black cultural stuff, and they're like, okay, this is all very interesting. Let's go talk to this guidance counselor.
Well, and before the parents go to talk to the guidance counselor, we just need to say Michael purposefully stopped taking the test.
Oh, yeah. He essentially walked out in protest.
Right. He was like, I'm going to, even if he had to just sit there, right? He was like, I'm not going to take this because it isn't fair. And yeah, I'm going to do well on it because that's me. But that's not fair to all my other friends who might be just as good as, our white peers, but can't, have a handicap on a test like this because of the way that it's written.
Yeah.
And
he's
so
like the Tim Tebow of his high school, right?
Yeah,
Am I getting that reference right?
And so he's like, just not going to do it. And so he doesn't in protest, gets this low score, explains it all to his parents. His parents go down to the school to have a chat with the testing administrator, who is a very recognizable character actor.
I love this guy. He shows up in lots of things. He's always playing someone who sort of represents like a white guy in a suit who is dumb.
or just
on
like
one level, or a square.
Yes.
This guy is just forever burned into my brain as the other lawyer in My Cousin Vinny. We went to see that movie in the movie theaters when I was, 12, 13 years old or something. And Ralph Macchio's buddy, who doesn't have any confidence in the Joe Pesci character,
right.
He wants to just hire this random run-of-the-mill lawyer.
Yeah.
And then the bit is he gets up to give his opening statement and he's so inarticulate, he can't even make words and just kind of chuckles and sweats his way through the whole thing. And when I saw that movie, I thought that was the funniest damn thing in the world. So every time I see this guy, and this is the youngest we've ever seen him, young,
he is.
brown-haired
I was like, wow, he's a
version
baby.
of this guy, but I always recognize him from that. So yeah, he is this fuddy-duddy guidance counselor.
Right. And the title on his door is testing administrator.
Okay.
And so he's in charge of, I guess, the testing for the school. He's obsessed with statistics, and he's got this little very early 1970s sort of cross between a personal computer and a calculator.
Yeah, like a TI-85
but
or something.
Not even. It is a computer
the ancestor of that.
Because it's plugged into the wall, and he is typing things in.
Yeah, like an adding machine, like they would call the old computers.
But he's also just calling up statistics that it has on hand. So it has memory. It has information in there. So it's an actual thing. It wasn't just one they made up for the show. This is an actual little like computer thing that existed then it was like almost like a PDA. Remember those, like the Palm Pilots? But instead of holding your schedule, it would hold statistics. Like it would hold the trig tables.
These are the days of like the electric typewriter and stuff where like computerized elements were making their way into other appliances. Yeah, this guy is very funny. His whole thing is
obsessed with it.
Yeah, it's characterized as like he's essentially an accountant, you know, and so it's making that critique of this is the way the schools approach testing and education.
And he's all about the numbers, and he basically, like, his mantra is numbers don't lie. And so he's going to keep looking up all the numbers.
He says your kid brought down the average of the class by 0.007%.
That's right. And, he scored below, the average person. Oh, you're black. He scored below the average black too. And is and they were like, Florida and James are like, oh, you noticed? Yeah. So like the guy's so obsessed with his little calculator computer thing that he's not even like talking to them, and they're trying to say, look, our son, and he won't let them finish. He's like, yes, your son did really poorly. And they're like, no, our son didn't finish. And he was like, yes, not a lot of kids, there's some kids who just can't think very fast. And they're trying to say, no, he didn't finish because the test is racist, but he never lets them get it out. So they just like explode on him, and they're like, your test is racist. And he's like, it is completely not.
Well, what John Amos says as the dad, he goes, we ain't here to hear a whole lot of yin-yang from your transistor. And so, they have to kind of like rough him up a little, just kind of like startle him. And then, they say like, this is a racist test. He goes like, this has been scientifically proven by computers. Computers can't be racist. And so this is where Florida starts reading from the Black Intelligence Test, the Bitch 100, if you will.
Don't call it. I think that's probably not what they wanted it to be called.
I don't know. I don't see how you get that by accident. They start reading from the test, and this is where I found this whole thing really interesting, and where I had to do my own research, if you will. I had to kind of look into this, because my reaction to this was like, of course, I agree with the notion of this bias, but some of their examples get a little sketchy, right?
Well, so that's the thing. They are the types of questions that they're giving on both tests are, number one, not questions that would ever be on an IQ test. They are questions that would be on standardized testing, not IQ testing. And then the Black Intelligence Test, it's more, it's like history questions.
It's history and colloquialism.
Right.
So here are the examples. The first thing they ask is, what was Malcolm X's real name?
Last name.
Real last name. And I happen to know that. It was Little.
Look at you, Jay.
I happened to watch the film Malcolm X on a plane several weeks ago. The guidance counselor doesn't know it. He says Jones, right? So you don't know that.
They give him multiple choice as well.
So, okay, fair enough. That's history, and at the time that this show is being shot, very recent and relevant social history.
Right.
But then their other questions are, what does Alley Apple mean? And what does, what is it, BTC?
No, it's TCB, taking care of business.
Taking care of business, right? So this is just straight up slang. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. When you look up this actual Black Intelligence Test, it is exactly that, down to those specific examples.
Yeah.
So when I'm first watching the show, I'm going like, all right, point well taken, sort of, but it's a little weird that all they're sort of proving is that this guy doesn't know black slang. Like, is that like, that doesn't seem like a super solid argument to me. Interesting. And then what I sort of found upon looking into it was like, that's sort of exactly what this was. Like, it was all, again, it was about cultural homogeneity. The way that Florida uses it in the show, and please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I looked into this for 5 minutes. I am not at all an expert. But it almost seems like the function of this test was simply to show there are tests that can be, on sort of quote unquote facts or
right. There are, and that are biased in one direction or the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that you can consistently predict that white people will do badly on. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, watching it now, it does seem a little like rudimentary or incomplete in terms of like forming a complete argument, when it's like, you didn't know what we meant when we use that slang term.
But it's not about that. It's about showing that they're like the test questions that are on yours that have been, tested and proven and, whatever by your computers, that show all the people that wrote those and all the people that tested those and all the people that made the computer programs to crunch the numbers on those were all white.
Yeah.
So like there wasn't, here's a test made by black people, tested on black people. It went through the same exact process that your test went through, but it just so happened to be done by black people and not white people. And look, you have the same difficulty. And so that is the point at that time, right?
Yeah.
Now the point is, how is it that a test like this can get through all of these stopgap measures, and at no point in time are there enough black people in the room to ensure that it's not biased?
Yeah.
How can it get all the way to computerized testing? And because every input, like we're dealing with AI right now, every input that is feeding the large language model in AI is coming from white folks and white culture, and that's why the chatbots and AI are biased, because it's a systemic issue and not just a test issue. But in the 70s, we were looking at it as, hey, do better.
Yeah, exactly. I guess in the moment I was wanting something like, the same way they used the spare bedroom to do math problems, if this test would show you like, no, you see, these kids can do these mathematical things and stuff if you put them in terms that they understand, instead of just being like, what does this term mean or something. Right. But yeah, the point is made, and it is very much, the point that this sociologist was making back in the day. And they just kind of get one over on this counselor guy in a way that, again, the audience loves.
Of course.
John Amos says something like,
his little computer explodes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The guy's computer straight up explodes in like a practical little gag. And John Amos goes like, you can't tell me what I know about if you don't know where I've been. Do you know where I'm coming from, or something like that?
Yeah.
And
that's
the audience
the end of the
loves
episodes.
it.
Yeah. And that truthfully is the message of this episode. Like, that could have been the title if it wasn't a long sentence. But like, there's no way that you can tell me what I understand if you don't understand where I come from.
Yeah, and we should also say the thing that the counselor is trying to calculate that makes his computer explode is the likelihood of Michael becoming a successful lawyer.
Right.
Because he says the percentage of black kids that graduate from high school, in this setting or whatever, with these circumstances, is like 7%. The number that graduate from college is like 3%. He keeps doing all the math, passing the bar, etc. And so, it's just like a very grim and sort of dark thought that he's sort of laying out. Like, if your
kid
not
wants, thinking anything of it, right? Just being like, it's cold numbers, so it has to be true.
Yes.
It's totally fine. And like not realizing the
unblinking racism.
Right, in what he's saying.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, they're just like, whatever, like, we don't care what you say. But that's what makes it explode, is him trying to calculate, like, it's like the infinite improbability drive
Supreme Court,
in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah, how he could possibly make it to the Supreme Court. But I feel like, look, in terms of a, quote unquote issues episode, like, this was great. Like, this would really be, just quite a lot to chew on, I think, if you're watching it in 1978 or whenever. And I also just want to make mention, JJ's been off to the side this whole time, but I actually think his little bit, this whole episode, he's getting ready for his date with Henrietta.
Yes.
Right? And Henrietta is like the Godot of Good Times. We never get to see her. He's just always, that's how he gets his dynamite in towards the beginning. He says, she's the fuse that ignites Kid Dynamite, you know, and he's just, so every time there's another thing like, let's go down to that counselor's office and give him a piece of my mind, he's always like, but Henrietta, she's
He's
gonna
like,
be
you
here
better
in
be
a
back
minute."
for dinner because Henrietta's coming over.
Yeah, so honestly, like, I think it's got just the right amount of JJ. It's using him well. You know, we didn't mention it at the beginning, but just, you know, again, with this being an early episode of Good Times, the characterization of this family, I mean, talk about a cure for all of that negativity and all that 90s bullshit. It's only funny if the family hates each other. John Amos is a total wife guy in
Yes,
this.
he's trying to get Florida away from her stew so they can go have some afternoon delight.
Everything anybody says, he's like, oh, I'd like to squeeze some of your melons. He's so flirty and frisky.
And like, you know, and she's kind of like a stocky lady. And he's like, that's what I like. This is what I want. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, really solid. And yeah, in terms of tracking the trope, I think this is the only one that's going to at least explicitly deal with the racial bias. But we have that thing already of, do you guys know what an IQ test is? I don't think it's a thing you have to take when you're in 8th grade to see what class you get it to.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah. No, this was definitely more of like a standardized test for placement or an aptitude test, but not really an IQ test. And that's, you know, that's all right. Those are biased as well. It was both like delightful that this show tackled that, and knowing that it's from like 1974, you know, or whatever it aired. It was both delightful and also like disheartening, right? Because it's so frustrating, and it helps me to understand even more like the anger of some of my Black friends and just Black people in general right now, American Black folks in general, because like, can you imagine if you're our age, 45 years old, and before you were born, your parents were fighting the good fight against tests like this, and now you're grown, and so you've experienced your parents, yourself, and now your children going through this same, you know, systematized racism. Like, I'd be mad about it too. You know what I mean? Like in the 70s, it was a moment to be angry about it, but still think we could make something, you know, change it, because we're just 15 years or 10 years away from the civil rights movement actually doing something. And now we're like another 2 generations away from it. And it was just very, like, it's like I said, both delightful and, you know, distressing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, look, our first Black president was a lawyer. I'd like to think that at least the statistics that the funny guy is calculating have gotten better over the years in terms of the participation in the legal system and the graduation rates. There are a lot of things that have improved from this time. But yeah, you're exactly right. The crux of this argument still rages. It's definitely a case of, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back at best sometimes, but
1 step forward, 3 steps back, but yeah.
All right, let's move on to Night Court.
Season 6, Episode 10, Mental Giant.
Yep, so this is going to be one that definitely gets into that trope we were talking about of what if the dumb guy turned out to have a really smart IQ?
Yeah, when Jay told me that there was a Night Court on our list of potential episodes for this show, I said, oh, Night Court, of course, Bull's going to end up with the high IQ. And he goes, that's exactly the plot.
Yeah. So I think the only time we've talked about Night Court is one of our very first episodes about the babies being born in the elevator.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Like I said then, I wasn't into this. We were not really allowed to watch this when I was a kid because my dad just thought it was so stupid. He was just like, no, that's too dumb. Don't watch that.
Don't watch that show. It sucks.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I've only seen like a couple episodes of this over the years.
Well, so what was striking me this time? Because, you know, well, we've talked about this this on the podcast before. I have watched more of this. This was one that was kind of randomly on. I don't know that it was up against any powerhouse show. So it was one that was like, I don't know that we liked it, but it was one that was just sometimes on. Maybe it was like in between two shows or something. So I've seen some of it. Like I was familiar with these characters. And when I was a kid and it would be on, Bull was always my favorite character because he's like a cartoon character. Yeah. He is the huge bailiff. He's like 6'6", bald-headed, and, you know, has this big deep voice and is dumb. You know, it's always the one that like doesn't get the joke or misses the point.
He kind of makes little kid faces and stuff.
Exactly. He's like, Jim Carrey light with the
or he's
the
like a
funny
Lenny
faces.
from Mice and Men type figure.
So that's his characterization. But the thing that I was kind of noticing in watching this episode was that having the like shitty Lothario friend in your group was like such a thing.
Oh, yes.
And like still remains, right? Because that's what Schmidt in New Girl was.
Well, kind of, but that's just so much better.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. It's moved beyond.
Yeah.
And so I find it so interesting that like having that person. Do we know real people like this?
I mean, I think the answer is like, I mean, yes and no. Like, obviously, you know, we all know people who are a little bit of a hornball, but I almost think it's more supposed to be like the cast of these shows represents the parts of yourself, you know? And so like he's supposed to represent like the horn dog in all of us. Okay. And then there's another part that's like the ego. That's the more like, down to earth person or somebody that represents your anxiety, like Herman's Head. Every show is Herman's Head, basically.
I'm not sure that is true, but okay.
What I find interesting is the way like, yes, so many sitcoms have that, but you get like this version of it, like John Larroquette, similar to Barney in How I Met Your Mother, the like buttoned up yuppie version of the Lothario, as opposed
like,
to the
I'm
like
gonna
wild
use my
man.
power, to kind of trick women, and always like I'm always chasing tail, but I'm really good at my job too.
And I'm classy about it, and I
don't know
these
about classy
airs,
about it, but
right?
Okay.
Yeah, I have this sort of like this materially high class kind of
I
like
have a look
me.
that is part of my lying to women.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I was like, gosh, it's so interesting that it's like, we got our hornball character, we got our ditz character, we got our dad character, we got our sassy black lady character, we got our dumb guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a very kind of formulaic.
Yes, they're
show.
all archetypes. Now, I want to talk for a second about the main guy, ostensibly, Harry Stone, played by Harry Anderson, the judge. I guess what really struck me in this one...
How much he looks like Dana Carvey?
No, to me, how much he looks like the lead singer of a swing band or something.
Because of the fedora?
No, the whole way he dresses.
Well, okay,
he wears
so
these loud clothes.
He's a clown, though, or like a magician or something. Like, that's like...
Yeah, he likes to wear red in particular. He likes hot, flashy colors. And
underneath
he has
his robe, so
this
you're only
kind of,
seeing it peeking out.
Yeah, it's like a cross between like a 1940s detective and like Ronald McDonald or something. Like
Ronald McDonald doesn't wear a hat.
When he's in his civilian clothes, he's wearing these like old-timey film noir like detective clothes, but they're so colorful. So that's why I say swing band. I feel like this is how the singer of like the Cherry Poppin' Daddies or something would dress. Yeah, it's just everything's got this like hot chili pepper kind of color scheme to it. And because the first scene is them in the cafeteria or whatever, in their like plain clothes, he doesn't have his robe on. It really just struck me like, Jesus, is this just how this guy always dresses?
So this is how you know it's a mark of a good show, because instead of actually watching the show, we're sort of looking at the clothes. We're like, wow, that character's drawn really strange, right?
Well, that's just the opening shots. They start talking in the cafeteria about, in this one, their work is making them take an IQ test.
Right.
Also something I've never heard of happening.
No,
I guess that
me
could
either.
be
But
real.
the way they set it up is that there's like some think tank that's doing a study on the criminal justice industry, and wanting to know about the, cognitive capacity of those who work in various roles in the criminal justice complex.
Yeah, the way that Harry explains, at least this part of it, I feel like is closer to reality than what a lot of these shows do. Because he says you can't study for this. It's just like we were saying at the beginning. This is based on your sort of cognitive reasoning and stuff like that. But then I guess it gets a little shaky when he makes a Rorschach test. He makes like a Rorschach test on a napkin by folding up some like mustard or something.
Yeah, he squirts ketchup on a napkin, folds it in half, and says, this is the kind of questions they might ask. What do you see?
But yeah, that's their funny little, like, it's a sitcom. We get to go around and each one of them say what their, I don't remember what the examples are. I'm sure John Larroquette is like, it's two ladies boning or something.
Yes, it was two women and something about probably horseback or whatever. And then Bulls was it's two rabbits getting run over by two semi-trucks, but then one rabbit gets away and then it gets hit by a clown car or something. Yeah. Something random. A Subaru, I think he says.
Yeah. And so then they all are given this test off camera. We don't get to see any of this. We get the sort of aftermath of it where they're finishing up a trial and we get just a little glimpse. This is what I would presume, like I said last time we talked about Night Court, this has got to be one of the fun parts of this show, is just getting these little tastes of, in this case, they're doing a trial about somebody who was like assaulted with golf balls. So there's a sight gag where this guy has like a prosthetic head basically with like 3 golf balls like wedged into his mouth.
I thought he just was holding 3 golf balls in his mouth.
I think in my mind, since I've watched it, it's been exaggerated to like his head was
I was like, I
wide.
can't believe they made this extra stand there with these golf balls in his mouth for this whole time. Yeah, because, the idea with Night Court, and we talked about this last time, is that because New York is such a busy city and all of these, little mini arrests, all of these arrests happen overnight, they don't wait for the first appearance until the next morning. They have this thing called Night Court, so you can like move people in and out so they don't have to sit in a holding cell all night long. They can have their first appearance and go. Like people getting arrested for solicitation in New York wouldn't end up like the Golden Girls in lockup all night long waiting for their first appearance or waiting for bail or whatever. They get to go to court right away. And then they have these sort of like two, a prosecutor and a public defender that are just there for all the cases. And that is John Larroquette and Marky Post. So she's the, usually the defense counsel and he's the prosecution. And they both, they take both sides. They read the paper, they read the case like, really quickly and then boom, make their arguments. Harry, the judge, gives his verdict and then off it goes and they do the next one. So it's this kind of like fast moving thing. So all of the seats in the background, it's one of these living sets that's kind of, it's not as good as Cheers, obviously, but it is sort of fun to watch because there's always all these people in
weirdos.
The background. Yeah, on the benches in the courtroom.
Yeah, so they finish up their golf ball case and they're like, all right, let's find out about our IQ results.
Well, the lady comes in and is like, are you all these people? And they're like, yeah. And she's like, here, I have your results. And they're like, yes.
This lady is very much, she's got the uniform in the 80s of a smart lady.
The
red
sexy
Sally
nurse.
Jesse
Yes, she's
Raphael
doing
glasses. Yes. She's just like in the movie RoboCop, the lady that is like sort of in charge of him is very similar look. The short brown hair, the big red glasses. Yeah. And so she's like, okay, don't discuss them with each other, but here are your scores. And I guess she gives them out.
Yeah. And this is the only one. So they don't discuss, I think, a score so much in Good Times, but this one, we start to get this idea of what scoring is. Yeah. Exactly. So on an IQ test, on a real IQ test, we're going to get some erroneous things later on. But on a real IQ test, 100 is average, and then you've got the standard deviation in each direction, which is 15 points. So 85 to 115 is considered in the bell curve, and that's all like average, right? Now, what we've come to realize and what sort of it is in the real world is that anything like 90 or below we definitely start to see some cognitive issues in terms of understanding, processing, and those kinds of things, right? And so most people are generally in that 100 to 115 range. So if you look at some of like the new charts, it's interesting almost how even that like 100 as the center, it's still, supposed to be the center, but we definitely skew higher in terms of like the mass amounts of people who have taken it, right? And so these are they're all aiming for trying to get, and doesn't Marky Post at some point say that I don't remember the numbers. 130,
140 are always the ones that people tend to drop as like, I'm really smart. This is my IQ.
Right. But what I always find fascinating is that 98% of people are not scoring above 120.
Yeah.
But in all of these shows, and in any time you hear people talking about their IQ, they're like, oh yeah, I'm 130. I'm like, sure you are.
Yeah, no, again, it's because like we said, it's not something that a lot of people really have a firm grasp on. And yeah, the thing with Marky Post in this one, it kind of confused it a little bit with Elaine in the next one. But yeah, I think she's talking about she's got a high IQ or whatever. Doesn't matter. The whole point is, surprise, surprise, Bull has a 181 IQ.
Right.
He is the real genius here. Dr. Keating shows up, this little stout scientist guy, and is like, where is the subject? Where is the subject? He's all giddy. The sexy doctor lady is like, oh, right here, Professor. Here he is, the man with the 181 IQ. And so, long story short, they're offering him a job at a think tank.
Yes.
They're like, we need you and your mind to come work at our clinic and, solve the problems of tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're going to pay him handsomely, and he's kind of not wanting to go. And he has a little heart to heart with Harry, and he realizes, what, I could be doing good for the world by helping out, even though I really like this job and I really like my friends here. It's what's right, for the world, for me to go and use my big brain for good.
Now, can we say if these sitcom writers don't have a firm handle on exactly what an IQ test is and how it's administered, they really don't know what a think tank is.
Nope.
And what goes on in some sort of like upper echelon, academic situation. This is like an all-purpose, this is like a room which simultaneously does like sex experiments with like neon pink lights at the same time as they're like testing out yak fibers. Like, what is happening?
Yes, and
here?
also telepathy in mice.
Yes, this is like, just like, and again, like, obviously we're being silly. It's a sitcom. It's meant to be dumb.
Of course.
But this is supposed to just be like, at this clinic, they have like the 8 smartest people in the world just get together and be like, you know what? Today, I think I want to figure out how to talk telepathically to mice. Let me do that for a while.
And so they come to visit. The reason that we get to go to this place is that Bull has been there a while and the gang is missing him, and they've decided to take a little field trip to
they
go
have a
visit
replacement
him.
bailiff who's all surly and doesn't listen to anybody.
She's like, I'm only here for 2 weeks. Yeah. And she is not nice, and she doesn't want to like join the gang and like become friendly. So anyway, they decide to go visit Bull and see how the new job is going. So they have their little visitor badges on, and they walk into this, testing center, and he's hooked up to all these diodes on his bald head, and he's sort of intermittently having conversation with the mice that are in the cages next to him. Yeah, and then John Larroquette notices that there's a, kind of a sex room. He sees it through a window that we don't see, right? He's like looking out into this window, and it's like behind a wall, and we're like, he's telling us what's in there.
The way that they got him to come, which I thought was just a one-off joke, was when they were all leaving to head over to the clinic, and Larroquette's like, I don't care, I don't like Bull that much. And Harry Anderson goes, oh, I thought you'd be interested to see their experiments on human sexuality. And of course, John Larroquette's like, oh, va-va-voom, and comes after. And And I just assumed that Harry was making that up and it was just another dumb one-off joke. Ha ha, he's horny. But no, like you said, they actually have this whole observation window for these sex experiments.
Right.
And yeah,
and
definitely.
In this case, they like the, attractive Sally Jesse Raphael glasses lady walks over and she speaks into a little microphone and she's like, send in the couple, please.
Yes.
And they come in and like,
we don't get to see them where
start
cameras
having
locked
sex.
on. Yeah, this experiment.
But they're explaining what's happening.
Yes, this is like a Masters and Johnson type thing, I guess.
But why would... what study would ever be people watching other people have sex?
In a very, very silly sitcom, this scene in a cakewalk takes the prize for the dumbest part of the show.
Yeah.
It's the two, John Larroquette wanders over. So the whole thing is a two-shot of John Larroquette and this woman scientist watching through the glass. And we're looking at them so we don't see what's happening behind the camera.
Yeah.
And it's just like John Larroquette getting hornier and hornier and like saying all these things, going like, look at them, look at their supple skin, look at the way that they touch each other.
The bead of sweat runs down.
Yeah, again, like super weird. And the scientist lady is basically going like, you know what, you're right, this is really hot. And then she eventually goes like, oh my God, take me.
No, she says like, make me squeal or something.
Yeah, make me squeal. Yeah, I forget what her simile is, but it's some funny little sitcom-y line. And then she immediately just like denies having said it.
She's like, I didn't say that.
Yeah, the whole thing is just, it's very, very silly. And yes, this experiment has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in the rest of this clinic, which is Bull trying to communicate with mice.
As one of his many like experiments. And so then he finds out that, he doesn't need to go into work tomorrow because he needs to pack because they've been offered this fellowship or whatever to go study the yaks in Nepal or something.
And
so
he's deployed to Nepal.
He's not going to be back for like 6 months because he's going to go live in Nepal and do this study with yaks about domesticating the yak so that it could provide a food source for the world. Like, we don't have enough cattle, so we need to try and like make the yak the food source. And so he has a funny little line later on at the end of the episode that kind of brings that back all together.
Yeah. And so, they escort, they kind of, shoo out the Night Court gang after a while. They say Bull's got to get back to work. And so, a little while later, Bull stops by the court again to talk to Harry.
It's the next day.
We basically, like, this is your standard sitcom plot of, like, one of our main characters has been removed to this other situation, this other job, and he's feeling homesick. He doesn't like it as much. He comes over to talk to Harry.
Well, it turns out he's been laying in that like living set we were talking about. He's been laying in the bench at the back of the courtroom for like the last couple hours, just sort of listening to the proceedings because he's been missing it.
Yeah. And, it sort of comes out because, like, Bull is sort of trying to contrive reasons that maybe he wouldn't be able to go or whatever. And Harry's like, look, you don't really like working at the clinic, do you? Like, you're not, you just don't really like it there. And Bull is like, you're right, I don't. But I feel like I have this responsibility because of my intelligence. And so, there's a very interesting conversation where it sort of gets into, like, if you have, it's like with great power comes great responsibility. Like, if you have this mind, do you have an obligation to make the world a better place? Right. And what Harry says is the world was a better place the day you were born. If you do good things, it doesn't really matter what they are. Like
where you do them.
Yeah,
right?
you
can
could
be
do
a good bailiff, and that's making good things happen.
Exactly, which is a very interesting thought because, it's hard to buy into this scenario when they're talking about, harvesting yaks and we don't even understand what his like area of expertise even is. But like, yeah, for the people that really are like curing cancer and stuff, like, do we need them to sort of rise to this responsibility, or is it just like, oh, everybody just kind of do what you feel like? But
the people who are curing cancer, or the people who are trying to cure cancer, are people who that's what they want to do. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's right. Again, this is supposing this whole sort of thing that isn't real, where he has this incredible intelligence but no actual desire to do anything. I don't know, but they sort of decide like, yep. Come on, bring him on home or whatever.
Yeah, he says he has this conversation with Harry and he's like, yeah, you're right. I can, I think I'll stay here. He's like, well, and it's going to take me a really long time, to pay back the clinic. And Harry's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, you didn't release all the animals, did you? So he has now at some point snuck into the clinic and released all these animals that they were doing the testing on. And then as they're walking over to the office to kind of see where the animals are, because
the judge's chambers,
because Bull has like hidden the animals there or whatever, because he didn't take them to his apartment because they'd figure him out. He says, he says about the yaks, he's like, the whole thing. He's like, that whole study with the yaks is just ridiculous. We'd be able to, the hydroponic system and being able to like have our own greenhouses and grow food locally is the answer to all of the world hunger needs. And I was just like, again, here we are in 1984 and people saying the things that we're like still having problems with today. And I'm just like,
I'm glad you mentioned that line though, because that, to my mind, that was the first time that Bull actually says something smart. And the show actually confirms, like, until he said that, I wasn't sure how to take this. Like, was there some sort of mistake? Is he not actually as smart as they think he is? Like, it seems like he's doing well at this clinic thing, but we never see him actually do or say anything. We just see him hooked up to little diodes.
Well, he does respond to the mice. Like, he is apparently able to telepathically communicate
with mice.
Could
believe that he's talking to mice.
Sure,
when he
it's
does
very
this
true.
whole thing, it's like the part in The Wizard of Oz when the Scarecrow says the whole thing about the hypotenuse. Like, he gives this,
that's wrong.
Right. He gives this little tirade about the hydroponic, cultivation. And so it's like the show is finally answering for you. Oh, yes, he is actually smart.
Because when they got the results, what the Sally Jesse Raphael woman said was, you think differently than 99% of the population. And everyone in the room is like, no kidding.
Yeah. So the whole time we're not sure exactly how to take it. But yeah, then Bull says straight up, I'm tired of thinking, I just want to be a bailiff again. And so again, very sitcom-y, okay, fun little change of pace. We got to see one of the characters in a different setting, and now back to status quo.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, this reminds me of the Simpsons one where Bart goes to a special class because he got a score, a high test score. But I think in that one, he cheated and switched it with Martin, which I was wondering if this would be a similar, not that he cheated, but like, oh, there's been a mistake or something.
Right.
Because I feel like this is coming from it, definitely from the angle that I sort of assumed they all would from one sense or another, which is, oh, this person got this high test score. What's the result of that now? To me, that is the sitcom-y way to handle it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Seinfeld.
Season 3, Episode 7, The Cafe.
Yep, so we definitely jumped at the chance to talk about this one because Seinfeld, it's a great show, but we struggle to fit it in because it's always got all these different things going on, and there's
it's not a tropey show.
No, exactly.
And when it does touch on a trope, it's one of these things where it's like mentioned in passing, but the actual thing, we don't see it, or it doesn't happen, or it happened to somebody off camera, or it's like it's one of 4 storylines going on, and so it's so small that it doesn't fit in with the others.
Exactly. And this is one of several storylines going, but I remembered this episode as having a lot of stuff focused on on the IQ test. I think this episode has a couple things that sort of loom large in Seinfeld fans' memories. We get all this stuff with the IQ test. And of course, this is the episode with Babu, the restaurateur. That whole story is, Jerry sort of taking pity on this guy who's got a restaurant that nobody goes to and, suggesting he changes the menu. And the funny part of it is he's constantly got this interior monologue going like, you are just a great guy. You just help out everybody, don't you? And definitely classic Seinfeld stuff. But what we're here for is at the beginning, while they're standing there on the street looking at that restaurant, George mentions, my girlfriend wants me to take an IQ test. Now, is this, you said this was because she is a student? I don't think I caught the context of this.
She's taking an education course.
Okay.
And she is like learning how to, score these or give these or whatever. And so that's why he's like...
Yes. And this show does, to a certain extent, seem to know what an IQ test is. They understand the difference between the IQ test and the SAT because they talk about the SAT.
Yes, and they also are using the right numbering for it.
Well, they are and they aren't. They have the wrong numbering about, and maybe it's on purpose, about the SAT when George goes like, well, really I forget the number he says.
He doesn't tell people. It's a different episode where we find out that his actual score on the SAT was an 820.
Okay.
Not in this episode. I had to do some digging to find out.
He says he got a 1409, which I'm pretty sure, unless there's literally 1,600 questions, I don't think you get a 1409.
Exactly.
But
there's no 09s. It's all numbers that end in 0.
I'm sure that's Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld being silly with the dialogue. But yeah, the whole point is it's kind of interesting. This is, I guess, sort of what I was hinting at when I said, the IQ test for sort of normal adults is a little bit beside the point. This show presents you with these 4 characters that are all kind of wacky in their own way, successful to different extents, but it's almost just like a fun fact about somebody. Like, oh yeah, I actually have a high IQ or something, it doesn't really play into their lives. But George is going to show up at Jerry's apartment with his SAT prep books and everything.
Because he's trying to prepare for the IQ test.
Yes, and that's when Elaine comes out with, I have a 145 IQ.
Yes, and so he's immediately like, we got to figure out a way for you to take this test for me. Yeah. And she's like, whoa. And so they kind of go back and forth on that.
She likes the idea that it's a caper.
Yeah, she's like, I like a caper, and there's all sorts of funny stuff happening, right? There was some other references in this scene that sort of made me laugh. The scene starts with Elaine going, casus belli.
What is that?
And she's like, it's a Latin phrase. I read it in an article. And then she's like, I just like the way it sounds. Casus belli. And then George gets there and both she and Jerry at the same time are like, casus belli. And they never say what it means. They just say it a few times. And George is like, what is that? Is that about me? What are you saying? And what are you talking about? And Jerry's like, it's nothing. It's just don't worry about it. And so he lets it go. But yeah, I looked it up. Casus belli is, the Latin phrase that means the case for war.
Interesting.
And so I was like, oh, that's funny. That's kind of interesting. And then also Jerry does this thing. He's looking out the window and he's got a turtleneck on, which is strange because he always kind of wears dress shirts. But I feel like he always sort of wears collared shirts. But he was wearing a turtleneck and he pulls the turtleneck up over his mouth and nose. And he's like, Bazooka Joe. And I'm like, what is he talking about?
No, it is funny. They have references on Seinfeld. Obviously, I know what Bazooka Joe is. I don't really get what he's
doing. So I looked it up.
I
looked it up because I was like, what does that mean? What is he talking about? It's one of the other characters in Bazooka Joe wears a turtleneck and he's drawn in that way where the turtleneck is all the way up over his nose and mouth. And then as soon as I read that, I sort of vaguely remembered the guy in Bazooka Joe that wore that big sweater that looked like it was swallowing him. So that's what he was doing. But anyway, this whole scene was just sort of silly in that way where there's the inner monologue that's going on inside their heads keeps coming out in how you just sort of talk talk to yourself the way Jerry talks to himself in the rest of the episode that we get to hear.
I mean,
but yeah,
that's
this
part
was
of the
just
show
kind
about
of
nothing thing.
Yeah, it was
like,
just really fun in that way that there were all these like weird sort of like random things that do nothing, aren't part of the conversation, but sort of are, but aren't.
It
was a fun scene.
It's funny to me how like Seinfeld is probably like 15 years older than us, you know, maybe a few more. And Larry David is older than him. And you really see it like some of the references on Seinfeld. They'll just be like, oh, this guy, he thinks he's, you know, Clark Hanford Montgomery or something. Like they'll just throw out these names that I'm like, who the fuck is that? Like I've never heard that name before.
So yeah, Elaine gets kind of excited by the idea of this caper. And Jerry's like, I'm down for a caper. And so then they are like, all right, well, we have to figure out where you can take the test because obviously, you know, she lives on the ground floor apartment. I can just hand it to you through the window, but she lives right around the corner. You can come back here. And she's like, no, Kramer's always in and out. He's crazy. I don't want to do that. I need a quiet place. And so Jerry says, well, there's this cafe that's always
cafe.
empty. You should go there.
Yeah, and so it's very funny when the girlfriend is giving George the test to take. You know, he's asked to take it in this little, you know, spare bedroom or whatever. And
in
he's
her bedroom, yes.
Yeah, he's so confident because he's got this plan that Elaine's going to take it that, you know, when she's like, oh, George, don't take this seriously. It doesn't mean anything. He's like, oh, no, it does. This is the one objective metric that we have to measure someone's worth, their ability to thrive in society. Like he just, you know, it's just such a fun George scene, the way he like pours himself into it. And then, yeah, he gives it to Elaine through the window and just kind of like sits on the bed, like hanging out the whole time.
Yeah, he's reading a New Yorker. So she takes it back to the Dream Cafe. Meanwhile, Jerry has finally decided that he's going to stop watching this Babu Bot and his Dream Cafe and actually go to it since it's an empty restaurant that no one seems to be going in. And the menu is wide and varied. He's got Italian, he's got Chinese, he's got all these
Franks and beans,
rigatoni, like a turkey sandwich. He's got everything. He's got all sorts of, you know, all different kinds of things. And so then Elaine gets there and Jerry is like, now, oh, I'm such a good person. You know, this inner monologue he's got going on. I'm such a good person. I'm helping this guy out. He's going to be, you know, so grateful for me and my patronage of this business. And now all these people are going to start coming in. And so then Elaine comes in and he's like, eat something. You got to eat something. Jerry makes her, even though she's like, I'll just have toast, you know. And Babu's like all upset that she just wants toast. So she's like, okay, whatever. I'll have rigatoni. And then Kramer gets there and he's up in her shit and won't let her concentrate.
Kramer's got this great thing where he's going, is it statue of limitations or statute?
Right.
And, you know, he won't listen to Jerry when he says it's statute. So Elaine is at her own table trying to concentrate. He's like, Elaine, is it statue or statute? And she's like, it's statute, you idiot. And he goes, well, I really think you're wrong. It's great delivery by Michael Richards. And she just, you know, it's both times that Kramer has like a slapstick moment in this episode. It's fun. They don't bother to put any other ending on the scene. You know, they've established earlier in the scene that Babu hands everybody these hot towels when they first come in. And so Kramer is bothering Elaine. She's trying to take the test, blah, blah, blah. So when Babu comes over and hands them the hot towel, you know, Kramer goes all crazy. He Kramers her, flails, and then knocks over, spills things and
spills
stuff.
The coffee and the rigatoni all over the test.
Yeah, but it's just so funny to me that they don't feel the need to do that last beat where he says something or she was like, it's always just like Kramer falls, the audience laughs, and it just fades into the next scene.
The next scene, yeah. Kramer. Well, so I also was reading that this was the first time that they let the audience clap when Kramer entered, and it didn't happen in Jerry's apartment. It happened when he entered the Dream Cafe. Cafe. So, because like, I guess, I'm sure like they've gotten audience applause at other times, although we are in season 3. So, who knows?
Yeah.
But he got entrance applause at the Dream Cafe and they left it in. And then that became a thing where he always,
definitely.
like every time he showed up at Jerry's apartment, they let the entrance applause happen.
Definitely. When Elaine goes to give George back the test through the window and it's got all food on it, he goes, well, how did this happen? She goes, Babu Bot did it. It's very funny delivery. And this is another amazing.
I would say this scene is so good.
This has got to be top 5 Jason Alexander George moments on Seinfeld, when he has this completely unblinking casual nature to him when she's asking him all these questions.
Destroyed, it's covered in spaghetti, it's covered in coffee. I ate
a sandwich. Well, where did you get a sandwich? From my pocket.
Right.
But then what's all? It's coffee. But where'd you get the coffee? Down the street. How did you get down the street? I went out the window.
Yeah, it was, and he's so calm and cool as he's lying.
And then the gaslighting when she goes,
looking at him.
She goes, why didn't you go through the door? He goes, the door? The door? Why would I go through the door? Yes, very
the
funny.
window's right here.
Yes, great. And and then it's equally amazing when the next scene they're hanging out in Jerry's apartment and you hear from the street George going, 85 IQ, Jerry.
And Elaine is freaking out. She's like, how did I get an 85? She's like, I couldn't concentrate, but something must have gone wrong. You have to let me take that test again.
When he walks in, he goes, oh, hello, Professor, when he sees her. Oh, so great. Says, you should have seen her face. It was the same look as when I told my dad I wanted to be a ventriloquist. It's so funny. His just humiliation.
Look, Jason Alexander does a really good angry.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Angry, flustered, exasperated. Yeah, it's just so funny.
Very fun.
So, they have to have him take it all over again.
Well, Elaine is insistent. She's like, I want to take it again. And he's like, well, do you think you can do better? Do you think, real? And she's like, yes, I know I can. This is ridiculous. I'm 140, I'm 145. Like, obviously I was distracted. It's Kramer's fault. It's Jerry's fault. It's everybody's fault. I'm going to come back here. It's going to be silent and I'm going to take
she's
it.
She's going to do it in the apartment.
Yeah.
We get a nice little, and they phased these out more and more as the show went on, the little interstitial Jerry Seinfeld stand-up bit.
Yes, they were just at the beginning and the end later on.
And
right?
then eventually they weren't even there at all, except for
wow.
once in a while in the last few seasons. But we get a funny little bit of him going, what's the deal with the first question, the little sample where they want to show you how to fill in the circle, and it is a funny
fill in
bit.
The bubble, and he's like, that should be the only question needed. If you can't fill in a bubble,
that should be your first point of elimination. If you can't figure out how to color in a circle, then those are the first people you escort from the test.
From the IQ test. So she takes it again. This time, she's in Jerry's apartment.
Yeah.
And this third storyline that we haven't really touched on, which is Kramer's storyline, is that, and this storyline also spans like 3 episodes. So we're in the middle of the 3 episodes. So he's gotten this jacket from a guy that his mom was dating that left it at his mom's house. And they have broken up. And so he's not getting the jacket back. Right. And so then the guy, it's been months, right? Now the guy's calling his mom, wants this jacket back. He finds Kramer and now he's trying to chase him down to get this jacket back. So Kramer's trying to hide from him. That's why he comes in to Babu Bot's restaurant in the first place, is because he's trying to slip away.
Yeah.
Now she's taking the test for the second time. She's in Jerry's apartment. And just as she goes to leave, Kramer comes in the door, locks and bolts the door because the guy's chasing him. And he's pounding on the door like, you come out here, Kramer. I know you're in there. And Elaine's like, why didn't you just go to your apartment? He's like, well, I don't want him to know where I live. And she's like, but you're always here anyway. Like, this doesn't do, you're just across the hall. She's like, I've got to get back. I only have a certain amount of time for this test and I've got to get it back to George. George is going to be stranded in the bedroom. waiting. And so sure enough, she's locked in. She can't get out of the apartment. Kramer won't let her open the door. So she's stuck. And then we cut to George having another one of these straight-face gaslighting conversations with his girlfriend.
Yeah. What is his excuse this time? What does he say? I fell in the toilet or something?
No, I lost it. I lost it out the window. When I went out for another coffee and I dropped it.
Right. She's like, get out of here. And the last scene is Elaine showing up to give her...
like hours later. Tapping on the window with a finger, and Monica, the girlfriend, goes over and is like, "Are you here for George?" And Elaine's like, "Yes."
Yeah, she goes, "I hope you do better this time." And she takes the test from her, and then the little button during the credits is they're back on the street. Babu's restaurant has gone out of business. They're looking at the empty storefront, and Elaine says she got a 151. But yeah, so I guess she's vindicated. But yeah,
she's vindicated, and Jerry had given Babu Bhatt some advice to change the style of his restaurant. So the button at the end of the episode, he had all the different types of food. And Jerry convinces him to just do Pakistani food because wouldn't it be great to have a Pakistani restaurant in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
And then he goes out of business because nobody shows up, and nobody was showing up before anyway, but he blames Jerry. And then they're all going, "Hey, let's go out for dinner. Let's get something. Yeah, what do you want? Chinese, Italian, whatever. Wouldn't it be great if we had a restaurant that had..." And all of them give him a dirty look because he messed up the one that they did.
Yeah, exactly. So this, again, I feel like this is another completely different angle on the trope. This one is just like, oh, isn't it funny, like, if adults were to make a caper of this, basically.
Right.
What if you cheated on an IQ test? I think I've even heard Larry David talk about that, the inspiration for this idea was, like so many of them, something from their lives. I don't know exactly what the circumstance was, but somebody going, to impress somebody or something, I'm going to try to cheat on an IQ test. Like I said, I feel like this has a grasp more than any of them on what an IQ test is. Yeah. I still think you wouldn't really be able to do this because to properly administer an IQ test, I don't think you would just give somebody like some paper stapled together and say, go do this.
And a Scantron sheet. You're absolutely right. I think it's more like those kind of fake IQ tests that you can take online. They take 25 minutes or whatever, and it's a bunch of questions, and it's all multiple choice.
Yeah,
but that's
some
not,
sort of intelligence test.
Like an actual battery of, cognitive assessment is a much broader thing that like parts of it are spoken and parts of it you have to like engage with the blocks that they're giving you and all that.
But this does a really good job without doing any of the like, oh, it's ironic because the stupid person has a high IQ. It just does such a good job with them sort of reacting to the, the low score and everything and just all the sort of like planning of it. Like they really do a good job with just
and we have in all but good times, right? We have someone in each episode who is like Marky Post and then Julia Louis-Dreyfus in this one where they get a score that they're like, this is not accurate.
It's always the normie character, the one that's supposed to be like a little more kind of down to earth and smart, you know, and the pride goeth before a fall. All right, let's bring it on home with Keenan and Kel.
Oh, here goes.
I don't know if we're allowed to do that.
We're not allowed to say the catchphrase from Keenan and Kel. So
we'll
they
have
open
to check.
Oh, get out of here.
I'll have to consult.
You have to consult. So, here it goes. Is Kel's catchphrase. He starts and ends every episode with it. Keenan and Kel are, of course, beloved characters that came from the All That Nickelodeon sketch show that got rolled out into or spun off into their own show, just like The Amanda Show. The Amanda Show was still more of a sketch show, and this was, they had a little open and closing where they were, kind of introducing the show.
Kind of like Seinfeld almost. They're not stand-up comics within the show, but it has that same vibe. Also reminded me a lot of Key and Peele, just the thing of the two guys on stage together kind of bantering.
Yeah. And so, but again, not sketches in the middle. Like All That and The Amanda Show also have the kids out there at the beginning and end introducing the show and introducing the sketches and stuff. But in this case, Keenan and Kel is a proper sitcom in between the like introduction that feels much more cabaret-y.
Yeah, family sitcom, pretty, like straight up.
Straightforward, like Nickelodeon sitcom, mom, dad, kid, and then friend.
Yeah, the theme song is Coolio.
Yes.
I thought that was great.
It's very Coolio.
I feel like that may be the last time I use words like great or, tolerable when talking about this show.
No, I mean, look, it's one of these, like, it definitely, like, this is Dan Schneider, but not fully. This was, like, somebody else's idea. And then he was a producer, obviously, because he was the producer of all that. But, like, this doesn't have any of the funny that iCarly or these other Dan Schneider shows have.
Yeah, it's funny how they never get tired. You've got Keenan and Kel, Sam and Kat, Drake and Josh, it's a tried and true formula. This one, I don't think I've ever seen. I liked all that, and I don't think I followed them to Keenan and Kel. This was late 90s.
And that's the thing, exactly. This was like 98. So like Keenan and Kel, so all that came out, like hit right as I was sort of aging out of Nickelodeon. Yeah.
I remember Kel or Keenan being hilarious on that as a little
yes,
kid.
he was very, very funny. He's basically our age, so like he was one of the older kids on all that, and so was Kel.
Bathtub.
Right, and so I think I was sort of aging out of Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon hadn't yet like done the thing where they were kind of doing stuff for tweens and teens. It was still kind of kid things. And it was just like a year or two after I aged out that they really started making a push for tweens and teens. And I was already gone by then. I was already I was already watching other things and other things. And so, but that's when this show happened, right? And this episode that we watched, like you said, season 3, it's 1998. I'm in high school. Like, I'm a senior in high school. I'm not watching Nickelodeon.
It wouldn't make a lot of sense for us to watch this, but like we've said before, iCarly has lots to offer for an adult. Like, you might still
and that's
be
like,
a little
what,
weird to
10
watch
years
it.
later, though.
Yeah.
I mean, iCarly was a thing when I was like 25.
Yeah, exactly. That was much later. But I guess what I'm getting at is this Keenan and Kel show, the sense of humor, the whole sensibility about it. The polite way to put it is this is squarely for kids. This is not...
It feels like when we watch Clarissa Explains It All.
Yeah, but I would say like Clarissa on meth or something. Like, it's just so...
Well, because of the crazy comedy with, with just, Kel, always doing physical comedy.
Just the constant like buffoonery. And it is, like we've said, Keenan, I thought so when he was, 10 in the 90s. And I think so now when he's in his 40s. He is just a naturally hilarious performer.
Yeah.
Very, very talented comedic guy. But it is quite a situation when he is your straight man. Like, he's the one that's supposed to be the smart, normal one.
Well, that's always been true, but he's mischievous.
Yeah, I mean, he's just Keenan. It's just like the way that he elevates the dialogue by just doing his funny faces when like what he's saying is such mediocre sitcom garbage, but then he just does this funny little smile that makes it funny. So yeah, Keenan is great, but he does what he can. But Kel is tough to take. Just like the sheer buffoonery. Like, he's just one of those characters that's like, his thing is, he is stupid. And if you're wondering how he's different from other characters that are stupid, he's just even dumber than they are. Like, he's just like, it's just nothing but loudness and idiocy and like flailing around.
Well, and that's the thing. I think it's like for him, it's the physical comedy. He is like the here it goes, like that whole like here it goes, you know what I mean, like that, like you can't say it without flailing your arms and like wiggling around. That is Kel's characterization, like that character that he created is, I mean, he's always throwing his body on tops of desks and tables and falling over things and knocking things down, and like he takes a piece of paper out of his pocket and it takes him 4 catches in the air to try to actually grab it, you know what I mean, like everything everything is a bit, like a physical comedy bit with him.
Yeah. And so, and again, the whole pitch of the show isn't all that different. So it just, like, again, what I would say, I think the generous way to put it is that Nickelodeon at this time is carving out a niche where it's like, this isn't Disney or Pixar even that was around at this time, where it's like, we're not trying to make this high quality thing that appeals to everybody. Like, this is specifically for kids and young teenagers. And the fact that adults find it annoying is part of it.
Yeah, is the point.
Like, we want it to have that subversiveness. It just so happens it's easy to write like really dumb, like crappy stuff like this. But yeah, like this is meant to be just kind of in your face and a little grating and sort of dialed up to 11. And if your mom can't stand it, then like that's kind of part of the fun. So I guess that's the way to look at this, because just the whole thing, like everything that Keenan says is just his whole sort of like cross-eyed, like vibe is just like it wears thin.
You mean Kel?
Immediately.
Yeah,
Kel. I mean Kel.
So, all right. All of that being said, the show proper, like the sitcom part of the show starts. They're coming down. We're at Keenan's house, and he and his dad are coming down to breakfast, and they have this little routine where like the dad gets the bowls, Keenan pours the cereal, the dad pours the milk, and they spill stuff everywhere, but they don't care because somebody will clean it up. And they go over to the table, and Kel is lying on the table asleep, like sprawled out all over. And the mom comes in, she gets her coffee, she goes to sit down. She says, "Why is Kel on our table?" Keenan's like, "I don't know. He must have, fallen asleep while studying or something." And so he goes to wake him up. And of course, when he finally wakes up, he like flails everywhere, knocks the coffee all over everybody, knocks the cereal all over everywhere. And we find out that he, like George Costanza, has been studying for the IQ test that they're going to have to take at school that day.
Keenan says, like our other characters, you can't study for the IQ test, but he says, well, I can at least exercise my brain. He stacks things on top of his head and does more wacky stuff because he's exercising his brain. Yeah. This is the one where I think the most that the writers don't know the difference between an IQ test and the SAT.
Or not even the SAT. This is just a test because they said, like, when we get to the scoring part of it, right, it's out of 100.
Yes.
Like, it's a regular test at school
that
out of 100.
That is wild to me. That, again, the internet is not really a thing. The idea that they couldn't even be bothered to just go, hey, does anybody know how the scoring on the IQ test works? Nope, it's just like a math test at
How
school.
much you want to bet that they changed it to the line, oh, you got something out of 100, because that's what they figure most kids would understand, and they didn't want to like try to have to explain why 140 is a good score or 110 is a bad score.
I think that's a generous theory to say that they knew the right way to do it, but they were simplifying it for the kids.
I mean, I have a feeling, or they got studio notes or something that was like, nobody's going to understand that. I don't understand that.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, they think that the IQ goes up to 100. They have a classmate, a nerdy kid in their class that is played by an actor that's roughly 37 years old, I think. He finishes the test in like 10 seconds. And then, they take the test at school. Mm-hmm. They get the results in the mail. And Kel finds out that he got a 96 out of 100. And that's when I said, just like we were just saying, okay, so none of this is real. The people making this have no idea what they're talking about.
And then Keenan finds out that he got a 3.
Yes, kind of like Michael, I guess, in different strokes. But he wasn't
in good
protest. Yes, he wasn't protesting the racial bias.
Yes, he was not at all. His parents are very upset. They're like, what happened? What went wrong? And he's like, and Keenan immediately is like, there must be an issue with the scoring. Come on, let's go talk to the principal. Yeah. So they go to the principal, and she's like, these tests are infallible. They're graded by computer.
I'm realizing as we're talking through it, how similar this is following in the footsteps of the Good Times episode.
So they
but with none of the actual themes.
Exactly. With none of the actual themes, but like scene for scene kind of similar. similar.
Yeah.
We skipped over the scene where they were at work and we got to see Arvid from Head of the Class be their boss.
Oh yeah, Arvid from Head of the Class is their boss. I mean, it's just nice because it's a Dan Schneider production. He was Dennis in Head of the Class. But yeah, it's great to see those guys. This is produced in part by Brian Robbins, who played Eric, the tough kid on Head of the Class. Yeah. So yeah, for better or worse, the Head of the Class legacy somehow continues in Keenan and Kel.
In Keenan and Kel. So anyway, so they go to the principal's office, and she, similarly is like, these tests are, infallible. There's, they're graded by computer and nothing is wrong. He says, well, Kel got a 96 and I got a 3. Well, first he says, I got a 3. And she's like, yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, Kel got a 96. And she's like, oh, there must be something wrong.
Yeah.
She goes over to her file cabinet, gets out the scoring manual, starts scoring. And she says, you're right. These are both scored wrong.
We did mention at the beginning of the episode, it's established that Keenan has drawn like a funny picture of the principal on a paper, and somebody took it or whatever. And so
Kel has it in his pocket, and it's like Chekhov's gun. It gets introduced in the classroom scene, and we don't want the principal to see it. And Keenan keeps being like, hide that, put that away. So anyway, all of that is handled, and she's got the correct test papers. She rescores them both. She tells Keenan, congratulations, you got like a 91 or a 93 or something.
Yeah.
And then
he got a 90 and Kel got a 98.
And then Kel got a 98, and he's like, what? But he's not as mad anymore because at least he still got his. And she, the principal's just kind of shaking her head like, oh, I can't believe it. And then they all leave, and she's like, you boys have a nice evening. They all leave. And then we get outside the door, and Kel says, oh no, I can't find the picture. I left the picture in there. Because Keenan's like, give me that picture. We're not going through any of this again. You don't get to keep it anymore.
Yeah, at this
point, he can't find it.
Yeah, the IQ part is over, and it just becomes like a slapstick scene of them going through like a window that's on top of the door, like a glass pane that they've removed or something on top of the door.
You've seen those, right? In high schools and stuff, where there's the kind of glass angled window that opens at the, it swings out and opens on a lever kind of thing.
I've never seen one where I feel like me and a friend could climm through it simultaneously.
Well, they had to go get a ladder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, true, because a doorway isn't really wide enough for two people, and this one is, this is a very wide window so that they can do this joke. But so they go and grab a ladder that just happens to be standing in the hallway. They climb up it. They want to get back into the office so they can search everywhere for this paper. Then the janitor comes, but he's got his headphones on, so he doesn't notice them. And so anyway, they get in, the paper's not there, but then now they have to hide because the principal's come back because she's forgotten her purse and her glasses. And so, but they've got the purse down there under the desk with them. And then she kicks off her shoes and calls her husband to say she's going to be late because she had to come back inside. So Kel gets to smell her feet, like all of this crazy stuff is happening.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, like, in the end, they do get caught in the principal's office. She's like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, what? How did we end up here? Where are we? And try to do the thing that George does.
Yes.
And it doesn't work anywhere near as well. It's not anywhere near as funny. But Kel makes, or it's Keenan that does it. He makes a good effort at being like, good morning, Mom, or something like that, trying to act like he's just waking up and somehow got there. And so that's it. That's the end of it.
The whole last scene is just like a slapstick. Yeah, this is another one that obviously it's playing on the irony of, okay, the dumb guy, quote unquote, has a high IQ, but this one, like, I don't know, what is it doing with it beyond like, oh, then we thought it was a mistake. And then it turns out, no, his IQ is even higher than we thought. The friend also has a high IQ. And
And now we get stuck having to sneak into the principal's office because of the Chekhov's picture.
I guess it's nice to think like, oh, well, it's saying that they're not they're not actually dumb just because they're really like goofy and silly.
Right.
Maybe. Like that's
I don't think it's
something
trying to say any
you
of
could
those
take
things.
from
I
it.
think this was an episode of let's have a reason for them to sneak into the principal's office and then get caught.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm sure that, if anyone listens to our podcast that's a little younger, maybe they have, fond memories of Keenan and Kel. I'm sure I've, got lots of stuff that I grew up with that is not that good. To me, like this, there's a Spike Lee movie called Bamboozled that's about Damon Wayans plays a TV executive that puts on a modern day minstrel show on TV with black actors in blackface doing this crazy caricature. And it's very controversial and it's a very bizarre movie. And that is the vibe I get from Keenan and Kel, and I don't think it's at all intentional or anything, but there is something about just like the sheer buffoonery that it reminds me of that, the way they're just like so stupid constantly, and that they are the black characters being juxtaposed with the white teacher and the white classmates and everything does make me just go like, okay, I know this is all in good fun.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and right, like they had their good friend, like there's a girl in their class that's also black, and then they're also like Keenan has a younger
I'm sure
sister,
there's plenty of characters
and like
that
his
aren't
family,
so dumb, of course.
No, I just mean in terms of the show, like the point that you're making about the buffoonery is exactly what he, like in that documentary, that's what the black actors were speaking about, that they felt like they continually got the parts where they were stupid or always had to be like the idiot or always had to be humiliated in some way in their sketches. And that was something that was said in that documentary.
Yeah, there is. I don't think it's intentional, but the whole thing is a little queasy when you look at it now. Okay, so looking back over these, any MVPs, any overall thoughts?
I mean, obviously Seinfeld is the best one of the shows. Like they were, I think, like I said, Good Times was, they had a really good idea. I wish, it's not Norman Lear of it to go deeper and like really, really, really say something, but also in 1974, maybe you didn't really, really need to say something. You could just say it like they said it, nice and plain, and make the point kind of pretty clearly, this is what's true. But in terms of like comedy and enjoying the episode for all the parts of it, of course, Seinfeld.
Yeah, I think Good Times gives it a run for its money. Like there was a lot of good laughs in Good Times. Like I think we were laughing a lot at that character actor that plays the counselor and everything and all the interactions with him, getting so mad at him.
Well, and they used JJ just enough so that it wasn't so annoying, like, it wasn't all about him. Yeah,
JJ's runner with Henrietta and just, like we were saying, just the fun energy and the feisty energy from the couple and everything. I feel like Good Times for me, honestly, all in all, is kind of the one that I warm to the most. It's a funny dichotomy how Night Court and Keenan and Kel kind of do exactly what I was expecting. It's a sitcom about an IQ test. Wouldn't it be funny if the dumb guy got a high IQ and then zaniness ensues?
Right. And I think we're expecting the ho-hum version of the tropes oftentimes. And it's always fun when they, like Good Times and Seinfeld, when they do something more than just the ho-hum version. Yeah, exactly. Then Good Times and Seinfeld, they come at it from these totally different angles. And so, Seinfeld is, of course, great because it always is. But this Good Times to me was really, just so much. It just kind of exceeded my expectations, And, this is a fun one where it just sort of shows like, it's like they all have this different angle on this thing. There's like a kernel of truth in what it can let you do with the different characters and stuff, but they also like in true sitcom form, none of them like totally know what they're talking about or like understand what it is in real life.
All right, so that just about does it for the IQ tests, and what we're talking about next week is a surprise. The sitcom study is normally a finely tuned machine, but we haven't quite figured out what we're talking about next week, so your guess is as good as ours. We'll see you next time, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.